everyone. Welcome to the May TAG webinar, TAG's Technology Association of Georgia. Our webinar is entitled Supply Chain Management in the Industrial 4.0 Era. My name is Steve Vale. I'm the chairman of the Society of Supply Chain and Manufacturing at TAG. I first want to thank our society member, our society sponsor, Manhattan Associates, our Gigabyte sponsor. For today's event, I want to especially thank you to our event sponsor of Infor, Infor.com. And to introduce our panel today of three people, we have Mihir Shah. He's our Industry and Solution Strategy Director at Infor. We also have Doug Blinn, Industry 4.0 and Smart Factor Business Development Executive at Amazon Web Services. And Travis Wolf, our Industry XO Strategy and Consulting Managing Director at Accenture. And finally, our moderator, Penelope Brown, Director at the National Association of Manufacturers. Today's webinar will have no slides. We will be recording this webinar for being able to view it at later times. All attendees will be on mute, so please use the Q&A feature at the bottom to ask questions, and we will get to those questions near the second half of our session. So from here, I'll turn it over to Penelope Brown.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Just to give you a little bit of introduction to my organization, I'm with the Manufacturing Leadership Council, and we are the operations-focused division of the NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers. So the NAM, historically, mostly something of a lobbying organization, very focused on policy and legislation and things like that. And the division of the MLC, we are focused very much on what's happening in factories and helping businesses with that. So in particular, we are focused on the transition to what we call Manufacturing 4.0. So we see this as really a three-part transition that involves organization, leadership, and technology, the three of those things coming together. And while, digital transition and its related disruption have really been a part of the industry for a long time, it's really fair to say that this current coronavirus outbreak is something that is on a scale that's never been seen. There's no business leader alive today who's dealt with anything like this. The industry has never been so tested in its ability to be innovative and to embrace change and to remain resilient in the face of all of these challenges. So certainly supply networks are playing a huge role in keeping these factories running. And those networks are also being challenged in some very different ways that have not been seen before. So there's a lot of questions about the role, especially that technology is going to play in some of this response to meeting these challenges. But I think what you can say with certainty is that nothing is certain and nothing is going to ever be the same. So the question is, what sort of strategies and business models will we see evolving for future supply chains? So the first thing I want to do, and I'm just going to throw this out to the panel, and I guess we'll go alphabetically here. I'll start with Doug, and then we can go to Mihir and then Travis. But the question I would like to start with is, as a result of this current crisis, can you sort of give a read on, I guess, the current health and status of supply chains and really what supply chain leaders are focused on right now to get through, say, the next 30, 60 to 90 days through the kind of initial stages of this crisis. So Doug, do you want to kick that off for us?
Sure, thanks, Penelope. And I think AWS has a unique look into this marketplace because of our sister company with Amazon. But also with the fact that we are working so many customers day in and day out on what can we do, what should we do, what is that next step. And the comments that we hear from customers many times are, what do I need to do right now to get people back in? What do I need to do in 6 months? So when we work with our customers, we work with, like I said, internally, even within Amazon.com, what we are looking at is how these become built exactly how we started our Amazon Web Services, from a microservices type of concept. What do I mean by that? I mean these need to be built in a way that they can be stitched together, not separately. So if I'm building a system to do thermal imaging to find out temperature for employees or customers in the future as they're coming in, it shouldn't be a closed system as we go forward. That needs to be able to push data into other systems, but at the same time have data be pushed into it, because everything is changing. 2 weeks ago I would say everything is changing every day. Now everything is changing every hour as people are rushing back and finding issues and seeing issues in real time. So you need to react as quickly in real time to what issues are, how they're occurring, and how they're affecting that next wave of employees coming into the office or into the factory or into the facility or into the warehouse. So if you're only looking at that single point in time answer, it's not going to solve for the long term. So that's what we're seeing and hearing from our customers right now.
Thank you. Mihir, do you have some thoughts on this?
Sure, sure, yeah. So those are great points, Doug, by the way. So I'd like to take a little more, kind of an operational view on this, right? So we know for sure in the short term, and then I'll also talk about long term for a few seconds. But in the short term, we know for sure that consumer behaviors have changed, right? So there are industries being impacted. There are categories within those industries that are being impacted. There are brand preferences that have changed, and then the channels to the market have changed, right? Consumers are interacting differently. One great example that comes to my mind is Target, right? Target had come out with a statement very recently where they were having a hard time understanding demand, which says a lot. Target probably has multi-million-dollar worth of softwares and analytics running behind the scenes to parse through their point of sale data and the syndicate data and whatnot. But the demand was shifting so rapidly that they were having a hard time understanding when will they run out of certain products, right? First they ran out of the cleaning supplies. Then there was a huge demand for grocery items, and then it moved into frozen aisle. And then it again came back. So the point I'm trying to make is that consumer behavior has changed and demand is changing. So it is very important to understand where the demand is coming from. And it's very important for the supply chain and to make a resilient supply chain to understand where the demand is coming from, so that they can plan everything right from their sourcing all the way to the inventory and supply. For example, some of the areas of strength are, that we've seen are medical supplies. Any manufacturer, any supply chain, any node in the supply chain associated with healthcare or medical supplies is seeing huge demand. It's seeing the demand actually expand. Similarly, cleaning supplies, food and beverages, and all the packaging that comes with it, or protective equipments like it may be the protective glasses or protective garments that healthcare personnel are using. And by the same token, the demand has really slowed down for industries and manufacturers that are exposed to automotive industry or electronics or cosmetics, right? People are not putting as much makeup as they would if they were going out. They're not buying new cell phones because there's nothing, there's nobody to show off to. So it's very important to use technology. There's a lot of demand sensing, AI-enabled demand sensing softwares out there to understand where the demand is actually coming from, and it's a combination of working with the sales teams, using technology to understand what the new demand will look like and how much of it will stick, how much of it will just go away. For example, there was a huge demand for pet food. I don't think that new normal is going to continue, right? Because people just bought it, stocked it, and it's just going to get used for as long as it takes normally. They're not going to go get new pets, or there's not going to be, the pet is not going to start eating a lot more food than they ever did. So that's one piece of it. And then there is long term, right? There is as they say, never let go of a good solid crisis to waste. Like, you know what I mean, right? All crises are bad, but don't let a crisis go to waste. Use this opportunity to invest in the right places. There were trade tensions and there were tariff barriers already coming up way before the pandemic. So it's not that manufacturers have just last 2 or 3 months of data. They were seeing some effects of this over the last maybe 12 months, and they were already seeing how things are changing, right? What ports are closing down, what products cannot be procured anymore, and if they had already seen those patterns, and if they have the right technology to analyze that data, then they would have already seen that where a commodity kind of product is coming and going versus what kind of specialty product demands are coming and going. So there, all in all, my long answer to the short question is that there's a short-term aspect to it, and there's a long-term aspect to it, and there is technology that can be used for optimization and understanding both those pieces.
Thank you very much. Travis, would you like to add on to this?
Sure. Actually, I made a note as I was preparing for the session about demand signals, and to dovetail off of what you described, a couple of things. One, a lot of the clients have reached back to Accenture and myself and our teams around SG&A, zero-based budgeting, and the ability to decipher and understand the changes in the demand signals. And so the focus has been on what are the most valuable customers from a profit, from a margin, from a strategic perspective, from a contractual perspective. And if I use a couple of nameplates, I was watching CNBC yesterday or day before, and the CEO of Boeing said, "This is Armageddon." You don't typically do a risk management or dynamic risk management assessment for 55% of the airplanes sitting on the runway, customers not buying any parts, not buying any new airplanes for we're not sure. And so if in fact it does take, in their case, travel to get back, 3 or longer years, hopefully not. I enjoy the business travel and the personal travel, but that's a significant change to everything they do, supply chain, technology, etc. I think the other thing is a client example about supply chain impacts, not to use their name, but a European OEM in the automotive space, shutting down production in Asia first and then into Europe, and then being in a situation where they've got to figure out how to get some of the plants going as soon as quick as possible, because they've got to ship engines to Asia in order to build cars. And so the car example is a popular one. Without a part or two, even how small or how big, you cannot continue to produce cars. So as the wave of C-19 in this case has come from Asia to the United States, I have another client in the 30, 60, 90-day time frame going all the way back to December. Won't name their name, but they were doing dynamic risk planning. They invoked their emergency procurement processes and teams globally when they realized the downturn in sales in China specifically, and what that would mean in Europe and then into the United States. And so I looked at their stock this morning, and it was still down over 40%. So not to say that was preventable, but the fact of the matter is, even with early detection in the global supply chains, there's still situations, this is an extreme example, where impacts are going to have to, and will change, I think, beyond the immediate term, where how supply chains operate, the visibility and the technology that's available, as well as decisions around what's important and what's not. I've been in desktop scenarios and worked with risk teams, and I don't think I've ever mentioned, do you know if your tier 2 or tier 3 supplier has enough masks, and are they taking the right precautions in their factories to keep our factories and our production lines and our supply chains healthy? And so we've got a completely new set of challenges and I think interdependencies that have been extremely highlighted. The national disasters in the past have brought some of these things to light, but nothing to this level of scope, at least in my lifetime. So hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely. And so there's another question that I'll come back to you with this one, Travis, kind of to dovetail off your comments, but I would like to know what the rest of the panel thinks as well. So I guess sort of envisioning kind of the future models of the supply chain. First of all, it's sort of a two-part question. Do you think we will be shifting to more localized / nearshoring / reshoring supply chains, and or do you think that this could be the end of just-in-time thinking and more shift to like a strategic inventory thinking? What are your thoughts on those two things?
Well, that's you hit on some interesting subjects. I do think, particularly in one space, and maybe we'll broaden it from there. I'll mention a different industry than I have before in life sciences, particularly in the pharma space. A lot of people don't even realize that penicillin is no longer manufactured in the northern hemisphere. It's been gone for quite a while, and so it was moved offshore to Puerto Rico and then on to China. So, not to get political, but 80% of either the materials or the pharmaceutical drugs that the United States consumes are made in China and or in India. And so, if you think about the pandemic, the ability to get medication to our military, to our citizens, I think you're going to see not only legislation, which has already been introduced by several members of Congress, but also incentives to bring certain manufacturing and capabilities back either nearshore or to the U.S. So that is not something that happens overnight. We're talking about facilities that have to be built, workers that have to be trained, as well as certainly the supply chains and how you would engineer all of the tasks that would take. And so I think pharmaceutical and life sciences space is going to be really interesting as we kind of go forward. The other thing I think that's really interesting as far as supply chains go, if you look at the profitability of our logistics providers and parcel deliveries, so I'm talking specifically about in some aspects Amazon, who's on the phone with us today, but also UPS and FedEx, the last mile is extremely expensive. And so their profitability has dropped because now they're delivering, I think someone mentioned dog food earlier, and all of the groceries and other staples that we might run to the grocery store for via truck. And that last mile is a difficult thing to handle for the supply chain and how you're going to interact with your own fleet, let alone kind of as personal examples if you're used to seeing those here since we changed kind of our demand cycle. So hopefully that answers your question. It's helpful.
Yeah, and since you brought it up, Doug, do you have any thoughts on sort of the last mile strategies and or other future considerations for supply chain models around just in time or any sort of localized supply chain?
Yeah, I think there's two parts of what I'd like to answer here. One is the first part of is it near shoring or right shoring or however you want to go, from that standpoint. We had seen some progress with multiple customers on, it's not really, I would call it more of a right shoring. So where should we be looking at shrinking that supply chain down? And part of that is really the lot size of one concept. Travis, you talked about pharma. The goal for pharma is not what historically was like for penicillin, one version that you produce for the rest of the life cycle of that facility. The goal is I can take your specific wants and needs and start to create for you. So now that's going to be really important when we start looking at the pandemics that we're going to start seeing more of, the other things that we're seeing more of happening out here, and we'll really micro shrink that supply chain again. So now how do I get a smaller batch, smaller size, nimble manufacturing to make one lot and then immediately switch over to the next lot as quick as possible? Think of, very weird analogy, but think of the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine now for your pharmaceutical. Wouldn't it be awesome to be able to walk up to that pharmaceutical machine, have your QR code with your DNA behind it, your wants and needs, and you flash your ID on there, and guess what? It magically produces the batch for Doug. And that is my unique little thing that I have. And when the next issue comes up, we built the right supply chain to put the right new parts of the product that needs to be built into that machine that is going to do the dispensing. And we're incredibly powerful and ready to go as we go forward. Now, that's truly near shoring or correct shoring. I could have that machine in my house type of capability as you go forward. Now, again, that's not going to be every product and every portfolio. But that is kind of where, if you look at the history of the auto industry, where they've evolved to, right? 20 years ago, when you walked into a auto manufacturer, it was one car, one line, one facility. The only difference was what color. You made a batch of black for 10, then you made a batch of red for 10, then you made blue for 10 cars. Now you walk into an auto facility and it's every variable, every type of capability going on from there. Now, when you break that down and look outside the four walls of that plant, that's where the next steps are starting to come together as we go forward. And we're seeing that want and demand with our customers. You know, when if you look at, you know, very quickly with Amazon, where, you know, going into the last mile, where we had to change and move away from, you know, not every product is going to be prime today because of the reaction that we have to do to ensure that the right products are being delivered to the customers from that use case that we were working with and demand cycles that we were seeing from that standpoint. And that was tilted very quickly. That was moved into our supply chain and our demand response capability to almost make that not quite immediate, but very close to immediate, down to what we're seeing of the ordering by location, by city, by person, to be able to drive that reaction. And I think if you combine both of those and look at that lot size of one and the dynamic response, that is going to be where I feel the market is changing very quickly towards. Hopefully that helped.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, Mihir, down to you. What do you think about this kind of future model of supply chain?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that has been said. It's you know, it almost is moving in the direction of customization, right? The last mile customization, which jives very well with you know, nearshoring, or you know, whatever term we want to give it. But I think, you know, if you take a step back to understand, right, why offshoring took off in such a big way in the first place, it was because, of course, there were cost benefits of you know, of getting the goods produced in far away places and being able to source them at very cheap cost, and the way companies and big, you know, big manufacturers or big assemblers worked with it was because technology enabled it, right? There were supply chain visibility, transparency and visibility softwares that ran end to end and gave that kind of visibility. So I you know, if I have to give just a finer nuance to that, is that, you know, those softwares and those technologies have only become better, right? They can optimize now. They can give end-to-end visibility. You know, there is of course sensors, RFIDs, GPS technology, which tracks everything. So, you know, so all of that infrastructure is still in place, and it will only get better. And, you know, once the borders open up, once the trade starts flowing again, those things are going to make a very strong case for offshoring again. But that's not to say that nearshoring is going to go away or offshoring is going to go away. I think there's a place for a hybrid model, which will be more prevalent, if I may say so, going forward. For example, and there were, you know, automotive and pharma are great examples, right? So the idea is that have that one big centralized manufacturing facility, which makes the basic, most commonly used basic backbone material. So, you know, for a car, it could be, you know, procuring all the aluminum, all the stainless steel in one place, building that chassis, which can be then sent to the local plants in the local areas for customization and for that rapid servicing to the customer, that rapid demand. For pharma, it could be that one key active ingredient, right, which is produced in one place, and then it can be sent to smaller plants, which are closer to the customer in different places and in different countries. And again, technology can make that happen, right? The visibility and the just-in-time nature of all of this can be, which is almost hidden from the end customer. They often don't realize that the car that they're buying or that the phone that they're buying has probably gone around the earth already 2 times, right? It has traveled, all its components and parts have traveled across seas and across oceans and by air to come together. So all in all, I think there's definitely a more emphasis on onshoring, but just to be able to respond more rapidly to customer demands. But offshoring is here to stay, given the economics of it, and technology can very well enable a good hybrid model to coexist.
Great. It looks like we've had a question coming on the Q&A, so let me call this up. So our question comes from Nathan Sparks asking, where firms are missing capability or visibility in supply sources, when should firms deploy new tools to increase visibility? Can ESG tracking technologies, including IoT, blockchain tracking, environmental disclosures, part of future solutions? So I will throw that out to the panel. Maybe let's start with you, Mihir, and see what you think about that.
So, it's on a case-by-case basis, I would think, right? So blockchain, of course, is a great upcoming technology. There's a lot of promise to it, but let's face it, right? There's just a few pilots out there which are being run on a case-by-case basis right now, and it's time will tell how effective it is for each industry or each set of supply chains. One of the main challenges for blockchain is, of course, that it's not about just one player, right? Like one manufacturer cannot come out and say that, I want to do my end-to-end traceability and tracking and visibility of supply chain using blockchain. It's always a set of players that have to come together. It's the whole ecosystem which needs to get a buy-in into that, and they all need to invest in that. So it's, it really depends how complex a supply chain is and how much trust there needs to be built within a supply chain to really build a case for blockchain. To answer the other part of the question, I think there's always and I'm going to kind of stick my neck out there and say this, that there's always a value and a return on investment case that can be made to invest in technology around supply chain. It could be with forecast accuracy around demand planning, or it could be around inventory management and how much working capital can be freed up by accurately understanding where the inventory needs to be, where it needs to sit, which warehouse, and then or it could be optimizing around the lowest cost models, or it could be optimizing around the best lead times and the best service to the customer. So it really depends, but I think there's always a case to be made to increase visibility and transparency in a supply chain. Hope that helps.
Thanks. Travis, what do you say to this?
Sure, I'll tackle kind of 2 of these. One, I think it's critical that you've got a business case and the ability to scale and really look at the understanding. There's lots of technology. Some is a bit more cutting edge than others. Some is very proven that we could discuss, or that this audience is probably very versed in. But it's, what is the return on investment, and can we scale it? And it doesn't have a use case that pays for it. I'll give you maybe 2 examples. One with blockchain. We are working with an OEM to think about how could we leverage, in blockchain as one of the options, but how could we take the VIN number off of the car and have that be the key piece of information coupled with blockchain that would then enable you to know every part, let's say on a leased vehicle that was installed, whether or not the vehicle, if it was repaired in an accident, was also the OEM certified shop, materials were used, what parts were used, and what that would do is that would protect the insurer, the Allstates of the world, the Liberty Mutuals of the world, but it would also protect the leaser, the finance company that ultimately will own that vehicle once it's returned off a lease, and the OEM themselves, as well as if it was a resale vehicle. And so, not to bore you with all of the details behind that, but that is a use case that does it prove out to use blockchain or other technologies to have that secure information and understand completely, not just the Carfax, but let's say the Carfax on steroids in some capacity, and for fleets as well, and some of that asset protection. The other example I would, in there that may prove out, we'll see, we're working on something right now. The other example I would use is I spoke with a company who I won't use their name, they're a startup and they're looking for funding, but they've developed an RFID tag, and using some specialized battery technology, the battery will last on this RFID tag for more than a year, and it costs less than 25 cents. And it will hold data and wait for a node to communicate, and ultimately creates a bit of a network amongst itself. Well, that use case doesn't make a lot of sense if I'm 3M and it's a pallet or a box full of tape that's worth a small amount of money. But if I'm Nike or if I'm a luxury goods maker, and it protects me against either theft and or counterfeit, now we've got a reason that 25 cents that makes sense from an investment perspective, and it gives them a real insight into their ecosystem and the supply chain of their inventory, into their retailers, etc. And so it just depends on the financials, the use cases, and the ability, I think, to be able to scale and not have it be a pilot. And a lot of the technologies that are mentioned in the question and that are in supply chain, it's been difficult at times to get them out of the lab. And so ultimately it comes back to economics, especially in today's environment. No one is going to fund something unless it has some immediate return, but also possibly a long-term stickiness that's going to change the game for them. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Travis. Doug, do you have anything to add on to this?
Yeah, ultimately, I think there's and the question's kind of been asked here is why? So great, blockchain, IoT, keep going, the buzzword of the week, and those are technologies. And what are you trying to ultimately do in your business, and is that the right technology? I'm sure everybody on these calls, the CEO came home from a new conference, and it was an IoT conference or a blockchain conference, and he goes, "Where's our IoT project?" or "Where's our blockchain project?" And the answer back to him is, for what reason? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to get better intimacy with our customers and understand how our products are being used? Are they trying to do a mutable ledger across the supply chain to get better visibility into that customer product movement? What is it that we're trying to solve versus just saying we need to do blockchain? Again, for why? And we see that a lot where it's the buzz of the week, the pilot goes off, and it never goes anywhere. It's a great little hobby for somebody to do. So we try and look at this a little bit different, and working with customers, we try and say, what are you first trying to do? Then let's look at either what's been packaged together already with partners, or what we could package together with building something to help you in your business as you go forward. Worst thing that somebody can do is walk in and say, "Here's your answer." Well, what was the question? And we try and change that model with our customers and really work with first, what are you trying to do? Then let's work into the right technology, because there's other technology out there that's very similar to a blockchain. Take immutable ledgers, and a mutable ledger is a secure ledger and hashing and everything from way beyond me technically, I'll admit, but it has a lot of capabilities to do what customers want to do with the blockchain type of technology, but will allow you to get into a secure track and trace type of capability versus the heavy lift that a blockchain may need to be up and running. And like what was mentioned across the supply chain. How do you get all those vendors involved, everybody happening from that standpoint, versus could it be done very quickly and then understand what the benefits are before you scale it as you go forward? So I think the question to really ask is not why aren't we doing IoT or why aren't we doing blockchain or but why would we need that technology? What business issue are we trying to solve? And then how that's going to help our business as we go forward.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I guess just to tail on, you're mentioning sort of the pilot purgatory, so to speak, that happens to a lot of companies. Definitely see that a lot in manufacturing. So what would be, Doug, your advice then to companies, obviously asking very specific questions about their purpose, but how can companies move beyond that? We're always in pilot phase and we're not moving, we're not scaling.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just the industry in general. You know, it's an IT OT coming together a little bit, where IT might be doing these proof of concepts and OT is going, that's great, I'm going to keep my business running. And if you're not showing a big value, great, fine and dandy. We'll shake hands and move on as we go forward from that standpoint. But I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of the concepts in Industry 4.0 and are moving beyond just the four walls of the factory and across the supply chain and across the capabilities, and are really highlighted in how companies are now starting to come back to business. We've got multiple customers who in March and April were coming to us, and I'll pick first on R&D. They were going, I've got a fleet of engineers who can't come to the office, and their plans and their R&D and all of the software that they use is stuck inside the four walls and they can't get to it. So we worked with many customers on migrating those systems into a cloud environment. So now it doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter how those are accessed, versus in the past it was, I need to be at my desk because I've got a high performance workstation and it's attached to my high performance cluster, so I can do flow dynamics for an aerospace company or an auto company or other things from that standpoint. So we saw a lot of customers very quickly move fast those R&D workloads right into a cloud environment. At the same time, once that file was in that cloud environment, they found out that they could actually share that across a new supply chain. We had a respirator company come to us, and they literally had, their files of how you build the respirator was on someone's laptop. Well, how do you share that with a third-party manufacturing company who now has extra capacity to potentially build those products? Well, if it's stuck on a laptop, it's kind of hard to get to, let's be honest. So how do you raise that into a secure environment? Security is always key, of course, from that standpoint. And then track who's using it, downloading it, seeing it as they go forward. Those are some of the basics that we've been talking about for a long time, that now people are going, all right, this is my impetus, my moment that I have to make this happen. Another great story was we had a customer come to us April 1st, and they had 11 different ERP systems, many of which were homegrown. And some of these were systems that were running 15-year-old systems. Could be a mainframe, could be old things that are running out there from that standpoint. And we had already been working with them on an 18-month journey to migrate those into a cloud environment and then look at how those could be updated and upgraded. They couldn't change them completely because, again, it's an FDA type of environment, and the process that they were using and the data flows were already certified because of the ERP systems and the workflows and the data flows that they had. Well, April 1st, and it wasn't an April Fool's phone call, they basically came to us and said, we have 2 weeks to get this done. We were looking before at an 18-month time frame. Now they need it done in 14 days. So we swarmed and we put together a team, and we finished that project actually in about 10 days with them and for them. They didn't have to completely change their processes, their approval, because the data flows were the same, the systems were still the same, So the process that they were looking at from a manufacturing environment, even though it moved from legacy into a better architected standpoint, was able to really get them going forward. So what we're seeing now is that impetus to move, these concepts were there. And I think people are looking, going, when is this going to happen next? When's the next one? I lived in Asia during the time of SARS, and I think we got lucky with going from SARS-1 to COVID-19 in that time frame. And I think that time frame is going to accelerate, and we're going to start seeing this more often. And I personally believe it's going to be not the norm, but we're going to have this type of effect more often. And these infrastructure plays that we've been talking about are relevant and valid for people to look at from the business continuity going forward.
Thank you for that. Yeah, just to tail on a little bit of something Mihir said earlier about supply chain infrastructure. So in looking kind of, if these things and, disruptions are part of the new normal and, we're kind of going to be looking at more of this in the future, what are those aspects, and I'll throw this to Mihir, what are the aspects of that supply chain infrastructure that you think companies should be looking at most closely now to sort of minimize those disruptions, but also scale up any sort of efforts to bring about better resilience in the supply chain?
Says that 80% of the data that is 80% of the data that is needed for a supply chain personnel or for a supply chain manager to take a timely decision actually sits outside of the four walls of their own business. So that data is pretty telling, right? Because what it tells us that there are only so few things within the control of a supply chain lead or a supply chain manager. Everything else is data that is coming from outside. And I think Infor does a great job at kind of giving that end-to-end solution. We have products such as Infor Nexus and supply chain management tool, supply chain planning tool, and then warehouse management tools. What it does is basically it brings real-time data, real-time availability of all the data about all the nodes in the supply chain. So for example, if I'm a manufacturer and if I have a supplier in China, and if my material is coming from China, then there is a real-time visibility into where that material or where that container is, when it's on the port, when it's on the ocean, when it's landing, where it is on my ports, and where it is, when will it be coming into my into my plant. So if I have that kind of an infrastructure built, if I have that kind of visibility, then there is a very precise time that my planners and schedulers will know when the raw material is arriving. And with that information, with accurate demand forecasting and statistical demand forecasting available, I can schedule my plant. I can schedule and plan all the assets of my plant very, very specifically with exact precision on what needs to be run at what point in time. That does many things which most people don't appreciate. Scheduling and planning a plant very precisely will take care of will of course increase the throughput, because there will be very less downtimes. The plant won't be sitting idle. There will be fewer changeovers. There are industries such as chemical industry and food and bev industry where changeover is not easy. There needs to be clean out procedures. There needs to be hazmat calculations. There are safety and environmental aspects to it. So all those things can be fewer and fewer. That also that kind of a precise planning also plays very well into workforce management and enterprise management. What I mean by that is, if the plant is planned and scheduled correctly, it has less of a stress and burden on the workforce. The employees in the plant are not being asked to do overtime again and again. So that has its own benefits. Similarly, if there is good planning, then the assets can be can be given their own downtime for maintenance, and which then becomes a part of the cycle instead of abrupt shutdowns and abrupt maintenance cycles. So that's another piece of infrastructure that I think is huge and can pay huge dividends. And then there is, of course, once the product leaves the plant and goes out into the sales cycle and into the distribution centers and 3PLs, there is that whole expectation that comes from the customers, what we now call as the Amazon effect, right? Because we as consumers are so used to have gotten so used to understanding where are our favorite pair of shoes, or where is my new electronic gadget that I ordered, and we track it day in and day out to know the exact time of arrival. Guess what? Those exact consumers are also in the business world, and they have the same expectations from the manufacturer, and they expect that same kind of visibility into when and where their material is and when is it going to arrive. So there's so much infrastructure that can be built to take care of those expectations and meet those expectations.
Thank you. All right, so just to, well, first of all, we've got about 10 minutes left for our attendees here. So if you have any questions, be sure to throw those into that Q&A area that you can find at the bottom of your screen, so we can make sure to present those to the panel before we wrap up. But I did have another question I wanted to throw toward Travis. Since we're speaking a bit about kind of these bits of supply chain infrastructure that need to be shored up, some of the changes that we need to look at going forward. So I know Doug had mentioned sort of the case of like the manufacturing executive coming back from the conference, really excited about some very specific technology they maybe don't know a whole lot about. But I'd kind of like to flip that on its head a little bit, because something we've definitely seen among our membership in the Manufacturing Leadership Council is sometimes there are leaders within an organization that want to make a certain technology investment, but they go to their executive leadership and kind of get the no, or they really have to work hard for that business case to make that kind of investment. So Travis, what would you think maybe are some of the impetuses now? Obviously there's a big crisis, but how can supply chain leaders really work with their executive team to make sure they're making wise investment decisions about their supply chain technology?
Sure, thanks. I'll actually give you an example, and it is not technology for technology's sake, but one of the things that I think, at least at Accenture and the work that we've done, particularly with our oil and gas and even mining clients, resources heavy clients, have been in the space of worker productivity and worker technology. So if you think about AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, the need for you to be able to operate a facility, triage an issue with a SCAD system or PLC or something like that, or even other tasks that are maybe complex with a base level knowledge of something is going to be critical. If you think about in the oil and gas space, you just don't fly out to an oil rig and not have the wrenches that you need or the training that you need. Well, that suddenly has come to fruition in the United States. If I've got a mill and it's in a remote area and I do not want to bring someone from outside that ecosystem into the site to fix something, what do? And you can use your cell phone and you can kind of do that, but the training materials and the technology that's available today has been seen as a bit of a luxury, and the business cases have not always kind of proven out the wide adoption. But I can tell you some of the questions that we're beginning to field immediately now is, how do I operate remotely? How do I be able to continue with a skeleton crew of significantly less people in the facility, because now I've got them spread out? Social distancing. We developed an application to help the clients know whether or not someone had come in contact and who they sort of got near. And so all of these are considerations that I think until recently were seen as a big niche or really kind of tough to get there from an economics perspective, that now really are on the table to seriously look at these technologies. Certainly you're going to have to validate the return on investment and the near-term importance and return on investment, because everything is going to be really scrutinized from a cost perspective today. but you've got to continue to make cars. You've got to continue to make and ship and supply your organization. And so we've got to figure out how to be able to do some of these tasks with less people, with less possible training, and be able to continue operations. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. I'd love to hear what you guys are hearing as well within your client base also.
Sure. So just a reminder about questions, if anybody would like to ask those before we wrap up. But yeah, true, definitely in manufacturing, the leaders are certainly looking at different ways of operating now, to kind of bring these social distancing practices into a production environment can be rather challenging, especially depending on the work. Sometimes there's certain work in a manufacturing environment that really requires close contact between a couple of people, or more, even entire teams. So definitely there's a lot of discussion around that. And sort of the current, concern is, a lot of these places have been running their factories with their production workers, but now they're looking to bring back some of their office workers or other sort of, non-essential workers into facilities. So they may have had a pretty good system going with social distancing protocols among their production teams, but now that they're trying to bring back these other employees, there's a lot of concern about that potentially upsetting the apple cart, so to speak. Trying to really keep some of those protocols in play can be a challenge for that as well. And even concerns, we've mentioned a little bit about today, there's manufacturers are still having to send people out to customer facilities to do things like installation and service and that sort of thing. So, trying to do that a little bit more virtually definitely is top of mind for manufacturers right now. So, certainly that's very, very good. Okay, so 5 minutes left, and I want to put some questions back out to the panel, to each of you. So I'll start with Doug. And I guess I'll say, maybe other than saying the serenity prayer, what is it that that supply chain executives can kind of do to help keep themselves educated on what it is they need to be doing to move forward in this different environment?
Yeah, I think it's a hard time right now because things are moving so fast and everything's changing on a daily basis. It's really, in my opinion, working with your peers, seeing what they're seeing, asking vendors, asking consulting companies, what's going on, what's happening, what are they seeing as best practices. Don't try and do it in your own bubble. Yes, part of social distancing is building your bubble, but that's the worst thing we can do in our business. Break that down a little bit and learn from your peers. They may see something a little bit different and implement it a little bit different, but you could probably look at that and go, I didn't think of that. That would be great for me to bring into place. And again, part of that goes back to looking and understanding how these capabilities could potentially all start to work together. The answer is not going to be a digital passport on your phone to take temperature and answer a 5-question survey, and then have your social distancing for Bluetooth or while it's hearing in there, because at most manufacturing facilities, you can't bring your phone out to the shop floor. You're not walking around with your phone. So that's not, it's not the right only answer. It turns into an and, not an or type of capability. So is it a phone or a application, a phone or a device? It probably turns into a and you need to start architecting from day one with that, as I mentioned right off the bat, the openness to be able to have sharing across those different data stores.
Thank you. Travis, what would you say to that? What can leaders do, supply chain leaders do, to keep themselves informed and on top of current situations?
Yeah, I dovetail really off of what Doug had to say. I agree with him. You cannot do this alone, and if anything else, you've got to have some partners that are true partners, and lean on those individuals and those companies, and then also figure out if you're not good at it internally, how to collaborate and communicate. I mean, we talked a little bit about demand signals and some of the changes it's not going to settle in immediately. And I think, to the point of the conversation, there will be change, and it seems to be very dramatic shifts in this example. And so look to the left, look to the right in your own organization if you're not doing that well today. And then also externally work with those partners. And it not always is a billable project or something that one of those individuals or companies could sell, but it is, you've got an ecosystem there. And if you haven't, you need to build that out and leverage some of the companies that are on the phone today would be certainly a great place to start.
Great. Quickly, Mihir, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, in addition, I agree with everything that's been said. I think in addition to all of that, there's just so much data out there and so much information changing at such a rapid pace that I would suggest taking help from analytics and AI and ML, right? Those technologies are superbly helpful in today's day and age. We have a customer who uses artificial intelligence tools to bring data and information from different directions, right? Internal, external, markets, their suppliers up in the value chain, their customers down in the value chain. All of that data comes together to show patterns that a normal person wouldn't be able to see. So use this as I started off by saying, don't let a good crisis go to waste. Use this opportunity to highlight the business case, to find the problems that are just going by, and use this opportunity to make a case for technology.
Thank you. All right, so I want to take this back to Steve Vale. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our panelists today for answering the questions. Really very insightful. Steve, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. Thank you to the panelists, and especially thank you to Infor for sponsoring this event. I hope you all enjoyed it and hope you have a great day. Thanks, everyone.